work-life balance isn't about doing less, it's about doing more. We tend to let them become a crisis before we get into action and start doing something about it. Versus what I'm trying to encourage people to say, don't let that happen. Like, I've been here, I've seen it. Start doing some things each day in your body, in your relationships, in your mindset that will prevent this crisis in the future.
Hello and welcome to Make It Happen with Will Polston. I'm Will Polston. This is episode 165, and in this episode we're joined by Andrew Sillitoe again. Andrew is a business psychologist specialising in coaching small business owners and startup founders. He is the coach they turn to when they want to get their house in order. Andrew doesn't offer fluff and impractical theories. Instead, he helps them clarify their vision, systemise their workflow and improve their personal and professional lives. Whilst his background as a professional athlete turned head coach turned business psychologist, Andrew has developed an effective framework over time, gaining valuable experience with over 10,000 students and clients during the last 20 years. In this episode, we have Andrew back on the show and we're talking about the 4 keys once again in 2024. So Andrew, welcome back to the show.
It's good to be back, Will. It's been a long time. We were just saying 4 years, which is unbelievable.
4 years. 4 years. Well, it's been 4 years since we did a podcast, but it's been a whole 24 hours since we spoke last. So
that's true.
But for us, it's not been that long. But for everybody that's maybe been listening to this, so the episode that we first ever did, which I'm just going to say right up front, I highly recommend people go back and listen to that episode. They don't have to listen to it right now, so don't have to pause this and go and listen to it. But it's episode 52. It came out in October 2020, and that episode would be great because we really went into Andrew's backstory and some of the many reasons why I think that he's such a great guy, and he's got a fascinating story which we really went into. But we're not going to recap that again today. But we are going to be talking about the same topic that we spoke about before, which was the 4 keys, which is one of your books. And what we're going to be doing is really recapping that, because a lot has changed in 4 years. I mean, we went through a pandemic, didn't we? It's it was and you had, just around that time as well, you had quite a big significant life shift as well, didn't you?
Huge, yeah. We were right in the middle of it then as well, and obviously with all the different moving parts of COVID and everything else. So yeah, there's a few things we can deep dive into, and yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
So let's just start with, for people that maybe haven't listened to episode 52 yet, which again, I'm going to say, go back and listen to after this episode, you'll find it useful. But for people listening to this for the first time, the 4 keys, what are they?
So the 4 keys are represented by business, body, relationships, and mindset. It's a concept I came up with mainly because of my own experience, right? So the short version is that I was a management consultant, having a successful time, traveling around the world. I'd had some experience, as you know, in my sport and coaching, and coached to a high level. So I was blending my management consulting work with the sports principles, and it just opened up a whole world for me that I hadn't been exposed to. So I was traveling around the Middle East, working with the likes of Ericsson, going to New York, working with Pfizer, doing the management consulting work. And I'd go into these organizations, and I had a sales background as well, so I could really sort of grow the business within these organizations. But of course, what happened is I found myself Monday to Friday traveling around the world. When I was back, I was writing proposals, and in the end, and it still haunts me when I say it out loud, my wife turned around to me and said, I didn't sign up for this. And eventually that led to us separating at the end of 2017. And of course, I was like, wait, what? I wasn't expecting it. But when you reflect on it, you go, actually, the conversations were happening for at least a year. And I just wasn't showing up in the best possible way, I hate saying it as a parent, because it's not because I'm a bad, and I always say this to business owners that I speak to, that have really committed themselves to their business, or even in corporate, but particularly founders, is they're not bad people. It's just that we become a bit obsessive with the work, and we take other things for granted. And that's what happened to me. So I quit management consulting essentially in 2017, went on a bit of a mini transformation because I was having not just problems with my relationship, but also problems with my own health. I'd stopped playing hockey. I was suffering with gout, like inflammatory arthritis. My hip was flaring up. And I just put it down to sports, lifestyle. And then I started doing a bit of research on it and thinking, actually, this isn't right. Not at that time, I think I turned 40, but I just thought this is not right. And the other thing that was always in my mind is that my father died at 48, it's of a sudden heart attack when I was 16. So that was on my mind. I was thinking, blimey, am I on the same trajectory? This kind of unconscious thing that might be happening. And that was playing on my mind as well, that I was kind of following this at some unconscious level. And so I thought, right, let's draw a line in the sand there. Let's look at, maybe living a different lifestyle. Where can I use my skills and put my skills to other areas where I don't have to be traveling around. Of course, online was growing then as well, and creating online courses. But what I did start doing was sharing my story. So I started talking about it quite openly on LinkedIn. And I was just at an event in Ibiza, and I said to these guys, look, I'm here. I shouldn't really be here. I'm speaking here, but my wife just told me, just left me. And they were, really? And I was like, yeah, no, I just didn't see it coming. And they were like, blimey, I'm kind of in a similar situation. I feel that, if I keep doing this, my marriage is breaking down. And all of a sudden, there was about 5 or 6 of us talking about this, all on the same page. And I was like, that's interesting. And I said, well, look, why don't you join me for 90 days? Let's do something for 90 days. Let's do this together. And so kind of what I call, I guess, early adopters of the 4 keys now. And they won't mind me sharing their names, but like Brett Ennals, Brian Johnson, Stephen, who else was there? Wayne. I mean, it was just a really good group of guys that just went and said, and we just woke up every day with accountability in the morning, shared our intentions for the day. And you're familiar with the coaching wheel where you kind of score yourself against these different things. And I said, well, why don't we just pick the 4 most important for us? Our health, our relationships, our mindset, and our business. And let's just focus on those 4. And then I said to the guys, I'm going to write a book about this. Can I publish your case studies in the book? Like your results. And they're like, yeah, absolutely. So you can see their results in the book. And I said, what do we call it? And we had all these different names for the book. And then we ended up with the 4 keys. We went with for those that remember the advert, with the Ron Seal effect. We had all these kind of abstract names for the book. And then we said, let's just call it the 4 keys. That's what we do. And now it's the kind of the 4 keys method. And then, so through sharing that and being very open, it was that extra accountability, for me. And so over time, I started to notice, a bit more trust with my wife. We started to reconnect as friends. We started repairing our friendship. And it really was that we were amicable. All right. And so, we had two children of our own. My eldest daughter, my wife was stepmom. I was a single parent up until my daughter was around 11, 12 when I met my wife. And then my wife didn't adopt her, but she, really took her on board. And so it was tricky, the breakup. So we started to reconcile our friendship. And then towards the end of 2019, I don't know who brought it up first, but my wife is from the Czech Republic. She grew up in Prague, although she'd been living in the UK for 10 years, well, nearly 20 years by then. I think I said it. I said, how about a fresh start in Prague? What do you fancy, being closer to your family and so on. My eldest daughter at that time was now traveling around Australia and starting to find her own course in life. So we thought, the kids are 3 and 5, let's do that. And even though it was a fresh start, we obviously we were married still, but it was still we're still working on it. And then I would say it probably took, because I think when I last spoke to you, our relationship, and people hear it, it was very open. It's not open in the relationship was open, but it was still repairing, still wasn't quite there. We hadn't fully said, okay, we're going to spend the rest of our lives together.
Sure.
And then we just settled into our lives here. Things got, really improved with some things like we haven't had proper holidays together, and things like that. Because I've been so obsessed with the business, and I talk about this, you're trying to get ahead and the holidays will come, and we say, we just got to take a holiday and have some time together.
Sure.
And I'm really pleased to say that that we really did reconcile, and our relationship is stronger than ever now. Like really, it's strong. We had a fourth child. I say fourth, third together, and just changed everything. I mean, it really did.
Yeah.
So I owe a lot to the group that I've worked with and the four keys, and just keeping ourselves accountable. And I still live by the four keys now. I've got another business here, as you know. I'm still running my mastermind and coaching people around the four keys, but I also run a business, and I can be full on with things like that. So I'm very mindful that I don't follow the same pattern with this business, and particularly this business. As you know, it's coaching, running hockey camps, which is an obsession in itself for me, hockey. So then to make it a business as well, I have to be really mindful that I don't lose myself in it. But so far it's been great, and I owe some of that thank you to you, because we had a conversation and you asked me a few questions. I was like, yeah, this is where I need to go with it. So yeah,
amazing. So the thing that the couple of things that come to mind, and we're really going to get stuck into this. Obviously, the four keys, as you've mentioned, that are really fundamental pillars, aren't they? In what people are doing, and you see it so often that people, they go off valuing something so much that then it becomes at the detriment of other things, and it's almost like what you water grows, isn't it? So if you're not nurturing these areas, then they're gonna suffer. And I think what's really interesting is that whilst you say we picked these four, I think they are all four, really, when you think about it, because typically your business is then what generates money. Relationships, that's your intimate relationship, that's your social relationships. Your health is your health regardless. Your mindset is your mindset. So actually you've encompassed, like if you did like a chunked up level of the wheel of life, which is typically 8 areas, you've just diluted those down to 4, and making all of those things. And it is so cliche, isn't it? Work-life balance, create work-life balance, have work-life balance. And I've certainly got my own opinion on work-life balance, which is that I don't think it exists. That's my thing, and I'm interested in your perspective. I do believe absolutely though in work-life integration. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I believe in work-life balance, and we can get into semantics. It's not work-life balance, it's work-life harmony, or it's life work, and so on. But what I do believe is that I think the misconception around work-life balance was, well, that means, I finish work at 4 o'clock every day, or I work a 4-day week, or, both my wife and I have businesses. We're pretty much on it 7 days a week, right? I mean, if we're not doing something, we're thinking about it, or we're talking about it. So work-life balance isn't about doing less, it's about doing more. So the things that people find uncomfortable, like doing work-life balance well, means getting up, and it doesn't have to be 5 a.m. It can be whenever, but the first 30 minutes of the day are used for yourself. Stretch your body, drink some water, do some meditation, box breathing, whatever your thing is. Take a cold shower, set some intentions for the day. That's 30 minutes, really. But even that, if I say that to people, they'd say, "Oh, I didn't do my morning routine for a week." Well, you didn't do the work, So, and then they'll say, you know what? When I do it, I just feel so good for the rest of the day. I feel on it. I'm productive. But I didn't do it. So that 30 minutes is that it's doing more, not less. You know what I mean? We're not trying to avoid things. The cold shower is uncomfortable. It's not to put us into fight, flight, and feel invigorated from the cold water. It's to train our mind to calm our nervous system in that stressed situation, which could be also stretching, because stretching can be uncomfortable. The brain says, I don't like this. This feels uncomfortable. It's too early. Well, breathe through it. Learn to breathe through those things for 3 minutes. Will set you up for the day. And then so when you start setting intentions for the day, you're not just like, oh, what are my 3 objectives for my business, which I think are important, but how do I need to show up as the best parent I can be today? Like what does that really look like, to be a father or a husband today, or to make sure I'm really looking after this body of mine? What does that look like? Well, I'm not going to put junk in it. I'm going to put some really good stuff in it, and I'm going to do 30 minutes of some heavy lifting or something, or go for a walk, So it's about doing more, not less. And that's what I think, for me, is the myth around work-life balance.
So it's interesting you say this about doing more, a lot less. So I'm a big believer that peak performance is a subtraction game. So it's actually that if you really want to go to that next level, it's about, right, what do we need to remove
Yes.
to be able to
Yeah.
go to that next level? So when you say it's about doing more, you mean more in each area?
Yeah, so more developing some habits. So I'm totally for, that's one thing I would talk about as well, which is, what do you need to let go of? If you
Yeah.
really want to improve your work-life balance, I can almost guarantee if I'm working with a founder and you would have experienced this, there are things that they're doing that they just should not be doing, whether that's tasks that are way below their pay grade or tasks that someone on their team is much better at doing, but they feel that they've got to do it. I always use the accountant who's doing the bookkeeping for his own business or her business. Like just because you're an accountant, it doesn't mean you should be doing the bookkeeping. You hire
Yeah,
someone
yeah.
to do the bookkeeping, but they think, but I'm the best at this, so I should be doing it, and blah 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 blah. So, so yeah, there's a difference between doing more, not less, which is um, do the self work essentially. Do more, so have some time to I haven't had a date with my partner for a long time. Let's get that booked in. Let's not let this thing kind of just get pushed further and further down the road. Bring it into your urgent box, a bit like the Matrix. That
Mm.
there are these things, for the most part, these things that I say do more of, not less of, um, are the important non-urgent tasks. So, for example, going to the gym is important. We know it intellectually. I get that, but emotionally, it's not important to me right now. There's other things that I could be doing than go to the gym or go for a walk for 30 minutes or do some body weight squats or something. Um, we become emotionally connected to our health when we realize that we've left it for too long. Now it's become urgent, right? Because we've gained some weight, we're unhealthy, we've got some respiratory problems or whatever it is. And all of a sudden, it's like become the most urgent thing in our life and we've dropped everything else.
Mm.
So for me, what became urgent was my own personal transformation because I'd let my health go. My relationship with my wife had broken down. I was overwhelmed. I couldn't see the wood from the trees, etc., because I hadn't been proactive. So, I think this is one of the challenges with coaching and whether it's health or business, is that for the most part, I don't know if it's human nature, but we're not that proactive around these things. We tend to let them become a crisis before we get into action and start doing something about it. Versus what I'm trying to encourage people to say, don't let that happen. Like I've been here, I've seen it. Start doing some things each day in your body, in your relationships, in your mindset that will prevent this crisis in the future, which inevitably will happen if you don't pay attention to it. So that's what I mean. And then once we get into the business and start looking at, okay, what tasks are you working on? What are the three most important things you need to do today? What can be delegated? What can be outsourced? And then that process of elimination I would see as a separate thing, but equally as important.
Yeah. There's something you said that I really want to talk to because I think it's very important. You said, how can I shop as the best version of me today? And that in itself, I think, is huge because so many people, there is a distinction between how am I being my best today versus being my best, because it is unsustainable. Usain Bolt doesn't run a new world record every
No.
day, right? But he does certain things. He has rest days, he has training days, he has game days, when
Yeah.
he's training to do certain things so that once every 4 years, when he's running that race, he's running a world record or whatever it is that he's
Yeah.
doing. And that sometimes, I mean, for me, I can definitely say one of the biggest transformations for me was about 5 or 6 years ago. I read Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, and it completely changed my approach to sleep, frankly, as you would guess from the book. But it was more so than just the impact on sleep. It was what I did then, what I didn't do to sleep. So I would, if I woke up and I really wasn't feeling 100% in the past, I was like, no, you get up at 5 a.m. and you do it no matter what. Whereas actually it was like, no, if I want to operate at my optimum, and I did it just so I did it on Tuesday. I woke up, I wasn't feeling 100%, didn't have the best night's sleep, and I thought, do you know what? I'm not going to get up today because it will be better for me throughout the day than getting up and putting myself through the rigmarole. And I think that's
I think that's a
something that
really good caveat as well, because being the best version of yourself for some people is like being 100%. It's like when
David
someone says to me,
Goggins.
Andrew, I've taken your advice, and they're like,
Yeah.
gonna get fit, I'm gonna get healthy, and I've signed up to the Ironman triathlon this year. And I'm like, wait, I never said do an Ironman triathlon. You know what I mean? Where now you're going to be training probably 2 hours a day or whatever, that. And so when you use Usain Bolt as an example, and I think this is your example as well, personally, which is being the best version of myself today is resting, is having the discipline to say, I'm not going at 100% today. So even with my training, I've got it here, kettlebell here. I'm fanatical about the kettlebell because I love its minimalist approach. It doesn't interfere with my life. My kids see me doing it. I can do a set of swings, empty the dishwasher, do a set of swings, change a nappy, do a set of, I can integrate that into my life. And also I will do 100%, which is essentially 100 swings. I'll do 40%, which is 40 swings. Not always doing 100. Whereas when I was training before, it was like, okay, I did this amount. Now I've got to add some weight in. Now I've got to add some weight. Got to add some weight in. And I'm walking around just feeling absolutely exhausted because I think I'm not progressing unless I'm putting more and more weight on. And actually, even, because I would think, oh, I'm going to be worse at hockey if I'm not developing and getting stronger and stronger. And actually, I'm showing up to my games better because I've got my energy and for hockey and my family, of course.
Which is the optimization thing, right? We're optimizing for optimal rather than optimizing for more all the time. And there's a couple of things. One that, again, for me personally, it was a huge realization. So I was, for 5 years or so, I used to do CrossFit, right? And CrossFit, I mean, in recent years, it's not as popular as it was maybe 10 years ago, maybe, but it was all about quicker, faster, more every day, quicker, faster, more. And what happened was that I actually didn't have that many injuries. I know a lot of people that do CrossFit get loads of injuries. I didn't have that many back then. Maybe that's why my body's hurting now so much. They're all sort of coming through now. But what happened was I'd associated CrossFit with exercise. So when I was saying, right, I need to exercise 5 times this week, some days I'd be like, oh, I'm dreading it. And then one day it just dawned on me, well, you could go for a 30-minute walk and that's still exercise.
Exactly.
And it just dawned on me that, I don't need to put my body through these punishing EMOMs and WODs every day.
I did it as well. Like you're looking left and right and making sure you're staying ahead of the person or keeping up or whatever. And then because CrossFit is a bit of a skill as well, you want to get better at these, so. And also it's quite addictive because of that, we're getting that hit, right, of endorphins. So you think, oh, I couldn't possibly do it. And then the next day you want more of it. You just kind of crave it, even though back is hurting, the hips are hurting.
Yeah.
So I've definitely moved away from those. I mean, I think I even talk about it in the book. I talk about HIIT sessions, and I was doing the freeletics stuff, smashing out 100 burpees and doing, this sort of thing. And so even since writing the book, some of my thoughts have moved on.
Well, that's exactly where I wanted to go next, right? That's exactly where I wanted to go next. Actually, before we go there next, there's one other thing I want to touch on, because statistically speaking, 50% of the people that are listening to this are going to be female.
Yeah.
And a large majority of the people listening to this are going to have children.
Yep.
Now, you mentioned about the first 30 minutes of the day, make them yours, right?
Yep.
The kids now are how old?
So my kids are 18 months, 7, 9, and 25.
Right. And one of the things that I often get met, so I'm the same as you. I'm a big believer. If you win your morning, you win your day. But one of the things that I get met with a lot is, well, that's easy to say, but what time we wake up is determined on what time the kids wake up.
Yeah.
And I can't say to the kids, no, go back to bed for 30 minutes when I've got a 12-month-old baby. So how am I prioritizing me?
Yeah. Well, I can only tell you from my own experience, right? So I will definitely agree with having 30 minutes to yourself is much harder than that, when you've got 18-month-old, with the before Eddie, then my kids were, 5, 7. So I could get up earlier and they'll still be sleeping and have that kind of quiet space. And that was nice. Right now, my wife's up before me actually, and I lay in bed with Eddie because he's asleep still. So she'll leave Eddie in our bed, and I absolutely love. It's for me that's the best alarm clock, right? He crawls up and he puts his arm around me, gives me a little smile. That to me is the best alarm clock. So I'm very content with that. So I'm typically up around 6:15, and as soon as I get up, we have Letna Park is across there. I try and get some sunlight in my face. So once he's awake, which is usually about 6:15, 6:30, I will go out onto the balcony just to get some sun on my face, and then I just go and have my water, and then the kids will be, my wife will be, doing running around, and the kids are getting ready and getting their school uniform on, but I will still do my stretching, which is literally 3-4 minutes. And sometimes Freya will join me, my middle daughter. She'll join in with a bit of stretching. Eddie does it. It's quite funny. Sometimes my wife she likes Romwad, and doing the pliability now, what it's called. So it's a little bit more fluid than fixed, but I do set a deadline, and my deadline is I want to be at my desk doing some work by 7:30. I want that, and I have my coffee and so on. So whatever happens in between, I'm not like, right, 5 o'clock, space, meditate. That's not possible. So you have to flex it a little bit.
Yeah. And I think that's the key thing as well, is that my thing is this: it's not what time you start your day, is how you start your day, and not everything has to be done. Like your morning routine doesn't have to be right. It's 5:01. Let's go now till 5:31. That's the thing. So that's great to see that flexibility and how you mentioned that. Interesting. So I read a book most days, just an extract from the book, because I think it's great for my mindset. For me, it's something that's thought provoking. It's definitely a habitual practice that reinforces one of the practices that I am or philosophies that I'm a big fan of, which is Stoicism. So I read a book called The Daily Stoic. I read one page each day.
I read your screenshots each day on Instagram. Yeah.
You do, yeah. I've probably cost Ryan Holiday a lot of money, because a lot of people do that. They read them on they don't need the book. They just see that I'm posting on Instagram. Exactly, I do actually get people messaging, if I haven't posted them that day or whatever. I do keep like, where is it today? It's funny. But which is a subtle plug for if you're not following me already on Instagram, then go and do it, and do the same for Andrew as well.
Yeah, there you go.
But today was about Sincero, and he was a philosopher, and someone once come up to him and challenged him because he said, I've read you said this and you're now saying something different. So he was calling him out on it, basically. Mm-hmm. And what he talks about, which I think is wise, is things change. You're allowed to change your thinking. You're allowed to change your opinion. And it's funny, somebody else said to me not that long ago, I think it might have even been a meme I saw somewhere, saying, if you don't look back at things you were doing or saying 3 years ago, then you've not been growing enough, or something to that effect, right? Which I thought
that makes sense to me. Yeah.
So I look back on social media, like Facebook Time Hop or Memories or whatever it's called, and go, oh my God, did I really say that? Was I really doing that stuff back then?
Well, I had one yesterday actually, and it was 2016, and it said standard Sunday afternoon, and I don't know what drink it was, but it was a bottle of, I don't know, tequila or something. And I thought, that's interesting. That was 2016. That's kind of when things were starting to deteriorate with my wife. And a standard Sunday afternoon was a bottle of tequila. I mean, I wasn't drinking a bottle, but it was just showed that was what I was posting on Facebook at the time. That this is kind of, it's probably like go to the pub, Sunday roast, have some alcohol, and that must have been some sort of rhythm I'd got into, which seems a bit, like, when you have transformation, you kind of go, was I really that person? Is that really how I live my life?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about. The 4 Keys have been out 4 or 5 years now.
Yep.
What do you think differently about that applies to the four keys now to what you did back then when you wrote the book?
I think the only one actually was probably the training. I really believed that HIIT training was the way forward because it was short, sharp, and kind of what I thought was a minimalist approach. And then I've definitely changed my mind on that because I don't think that was helping. Like every now and then I think it's good to do like something all out, but not like that CrossFit where you're literally doing it every day, or you're in the box at 6 a.m. or all right, I've got 15 minutes, I'm gonna do a HIIT session. I much prefer the mindfulness around my training, and seeing, even if I was to do like weight training in the gym, it would definitely be mindful, form, and realizing that actually if my heart rate is increasing, I'm getting fitter. If I'm lifting something heavy, I'm getting stronger, and I'm functional, and I'm not destroying my body. That's definitely something that's changed. So this kind of mindful approach to things. And I actually think that at the core, then, or you putting that kind of the core of my life has helped me approach other situations more mindfully. It's kind of trained me to be more mindful. So an exercise like the Turkish get up, for example, which when someone introduced it to me years ago, I'm like, what is the point in this exercise? Like, this is I'm laying on my back, I'm getting up to here and I'm going back down again. Now, because I'm more focused on breath work and slowing down, and I really like this, doing something like a kettlebell swing, which is a powerful movement, ballistic, gets the heart rate up, and then going to something like a Turkish get up. It's like yin and yang, you've got this nice contrast. So that's kind of like, for me, is loaded yoga, and I really like that. And I train without music. I like just, no devices and so on. So that's something that's really shifted. And I have a mentor here in Prague called Pavel Matsek, who is kind of well-known master with the kettlebell and some other things that he does. But so I follow him, and I actually I can book him for one-to-one training, but I actually book him just for a coffee. So I pay him to have a sit down and we just go to the park and we'll just chat, and it just helps me reset. I really like his kind of wisdom,
like a form of mentorship or coaching.
Yeah, and
then
and probably diet, is like anything, it's diet is always a personal experiment. So when I started my transformation, my kind of health transformation, I was suffering with gout, and if you know anyone that's had gout, it's just brutal. It's and my family would joke because when my dad passed away, unfortunately, kind of lost all his money, but the only thing he left Andrew was gout, because this idea that it's hereditary. So, when you get gout and you're in so much pain, we used to laugh at my dad crawling around because my dad was tough, right? I mean, he didn't complain about anything pain wise, but when he had gout, it was like, so we would laugh. I can feel myself laughing now because I see him crawling. And then for me to have it happen, not be able to play with my kids. So one of the things I have, kind of a mantra that I talk about in the book, it's like a value, is always be ready. And what I mean by that is do exercise and training and fuel your body in a way that makes you always ready. If someone calls you up and says, hey, we're going skiing at the weekend, can you come? You're like, well, I haven't done anything for a while. I don't think I'm fit enough for that sort of thing. Or we're going to go and climb Kilimanjaro next month. You want to come? It's like, or something, or play hockey, or, you still have this readiness for it. If my kids say, I want to go to the park and have a run around, I'm like, oh, I did leg day yesterday. I don't think I could possibly run around the park today. That seems silly. Or, sometimes I have this debate, like I train and I think, oh, I'll take the elevator because my legs are a bit tired from yesterday. Well, that makes zero sense, right? If I'm if I'm doing fitness training to stay fit and healthy and I can't take the stairs because I've overtrained the day, you know what I mean? It's like it seems odd to me. So
I'm searching.
That's where my shift is, if you like. But diet, yeah, I was going to say diet is so personal to people that I'm reluctant to talk about it a lot of the time, because it's very personal. It can really trigger people when you talk about diet.
I was just trying to look. So behind, I'm going to look quickly. Bear me one second, because what you just said there, I think is quite interesting. Yes, I've got it. So there are two, and you must. You must have given these away at an event or something you were doing once. So I've got two magnets that are on the end of my radiator.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
One of them says "Speak the truth,"
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and the other one says "Always
Always ready.
ready."
Yeah, yeah, and that's where it's from. Yeah, so we'll probably
Yeah,
bring those back.
fit to win. It says there. So that's the question. You said about being more mindful and using your body as a form of mindfulness practice, if you like, in terms of how you're
Yeah,
doing stuff. One of the things I've never really heard you talk about ever, in fact, we've certainly never had a conversation about it, and we're good friends and know each other for a long time now. Uh, Spirituality.
yeah.
Would you class yourself as a spiritual person?
It's a good question. So my brother was I haven't talked about my brother for a long time. I don't know if you know, but he sadly passed away 2 years ago, cancer. And but he was in AA and NA for 10 years. So most of my kind of teenage life. And then when I got to 19, he'd got clean, and then he was clean since then. So he really conquered that. And of course, when you do the 12 steps, you go on a bit of a spiritual journey. And so he'd definitely done that. So he would, one of my first books he gave me when I moved to Canada to kind of pursue my hockey. This was back in '97. He gave me a book called The Road Less Traveled, by Scott Peck. And side note, the family that I live with in Canada were Christians and devout
Mm,
Christians, like very serious Christians. And they saw this book and they really snubbed it, spirituality, because it was kind of like
opposite
for
of
them
religion.
it wasn't Christianity, it was some other form, you know. And I suppose looking back at that time, having lost my father, my brother give me these books, and he'd always give me a book. And interestingly, I found a book the other day, and it's called For Men Who Do Too Much, and it's little quotes. It's an old book, and in the book it says, look for the similarities, not the differences, which is a phrase, that rather than kind of going, well, that's not me, that's some other people. And actually, when he gave me the book, and I was like, the minute I'm all right, I don't. But it was in 2016 so he must have seen something in me, this kind of as an observer. So going back to your question, I think that yes, I think I don't know how to describe it for me, if I'm honest. I mean, look, I talk about the four keys: my business, health, relationships, and I got a Buddha here, which
Mm,
was from a friend of mine who came to my hockey camp from India. And he gave me this as a souvenir. So I use that as kind of from a mindset perspective. Of course, I've read books on Buddhism and the way, and so on. So I do have a strong interest in it, but I don't think I've really formed what it means to me. I'm very great. I've this year I've spent a lot more time on gratitude, and I do look out in the park and I don't know who it is I'm talking to, but I say thank you to the universe, because whether you believe in the secret, law of attraction, there's something at play that
mm.
I do believe in. And when I remind myself to have this conversation with the universe, it seems to serve me really well.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it's interesting. Yeah, it's again, the only reason I asked that question is because you said about being more mindful,
Mm.
and being more mindful in what you're doing, and sort of mindfulness is generally so this is my interpretation as someone that's a former professional athlete, that mindfulness is like the term sports, and
Yeah.
meditation is like saying hockey, right? And but then even then you've got different types of hockey. You've got field hockey, you've got roller
Yeah.
hockey, you've got ice hockey. So you've got guided meditation, you've got um uh um um oh my god, what's the type of meditation that transcendental meditation? Like you're all
Yeah.
these different types.
Yeah.
So it whittles down, but really actually all of those are being designed to make us more mindful. Anything we're
Yeah.
doing there. Some people just go running, and that's like I love going running with sometimes I'm a bit weird. I put my headphones in, but no music on, just to go running and just observe my
Yeah, yeah.
thoughts. I have some of my best ideas when I go out running. It's that it
Yeah.
is nice
Well,
to
I think
do.
there's running and there's mindful running, right? Because
Mm,
if I'd gone for a run in my early 20s, it would have been like, okay, the last 5 minutes, I'm going to sprint, like
yeah.
I'm going to, versus I don't need to do that. It always felt that I had to have this level of intensity but so, yeah, mindfulness does, I mean, with a slight digression, but, and we said I wouldn't really talk too much about leadership. But when I first got into leadership development, I remember that someone who I would say is very spiritual. It was kind of my mentor at the time. This was back in 2007 when I first got into leadership development and running leadership development programs. She said, never mention the S word, spirituality.
Spiritual, right? Okay.
Yeah. And that's how she described it, because you will, people just weren't, there wasn't a readiness for
Mm,
executives if you mention spirituality in a leadership program. But really, for the most part, in these high levels leadership programs, not management training, but real high level, where you're really helping people connect with the purpose and they're really starting to go deep into themselves. And there's an element of spirituality that is kind of surfacing for some people, but you're never allowed to mention it. So that might be one of the reasons as well why I was kind of like. And so if you managing the mist, my first book, I made a point. I don't mention mindfulness in it because I was worried it would be too cliche and would become a fad. In some ways, I wish I had, because I believed in it. But managing the mist was in this staying in the zone. I suppose I took a kind of a pragmatic approach to it. So I was deep into neuroscience, really understanding what's going on in the brain. Now that stuff's quite elementary today, but when you talk about limbic system and so on. Um, and so in the book, I suppose I took that approach to being mindful, which is staying present, staying in the zone, calming the nervous system, and so on. And so I suppose you could argue that I was far more Western in my approach
mm,
than Eastern in my
yeah.
approach. But I think the idea of fusing that and maybe even swaying more towards Eastern philosophy is is more appealing for me today. Actually, I'm very interested in that.
Um, Tracking progress. So
Yeah,
the four keys,
yeah,
fitness is an easy one. All right. Am I,
yeah,
I think you summed it up beautifully. If my heart rate's going down, I'm getting fitter.
yeah.
If I can lift more, I'm getting stronger. Right. But what about tracking in the other areas? Do you advise tracking? Do you not advise tracking? Is it something that people do for accountability purposes, or
Hmm.
does that make it less impactful if you're trying to make a lifestyle of it? What's your thoughts?
Yeah. It's not natural for me to be. I'm not analytical personally, but I know that people that come into the program, they will say to me, "Hey, look, I built this spreadsheet, and this is what I'm doing." I'm like, oh wow, that's cool. Like that's just not my style, but I don't discourage it. It's just not my style. So my style would be, um, for my training even, I'm quite happy now to stay with the weight that I'm working with, and my data is my back a little bit sore? Why is that happening? Is it because of my form? Is it, so my data is different to progress in that sense. That's my tracking. I will often occasionally say to my wife, ask my wife, how am I showing up right now? And I don't know if it's a check thing, but she doesn't hold back. You know, she's
Yeah.
brutally honest with me. Like, and I'm like, all right, I wasn't expecting that. Okay, so let me sort of spend some time. Maybe I will go meditate on that. But so that's kind of my tracking really. Yeah.
So jokes aside, though, and I do the same with Gemma. We, I will ask them, how can I be a better boyfriend?
Yeah.
How, just asking the question, how can I be a better boyfriend? And like it's funny, isn't it, when sometimes we think we're doing the right thing, but we're not. So I am somebody. I'm on my phone a lot. I'm very aware that I'm on my phone a lot, and particularly during the day, if I'm with clients or I'm on
Mhm.
podcasts or I'm doing whatever, I'm not looking at my phone then. So I'm in between the gaps. And then I am also the person where sometimes I just get to the end of the day and I'm just like, right, I just want to go home. I enjoyed my drive home, listening to something, 30, 45 minutes, whatever it is. And then I get home. And then what I was doing was I was getting in the car, staying in the car and spending 10 or 15 minutes doing my messages.
Mm.
Right. And then I thought that I was doing that so that when I walked in the door, I was present, I was there, and that was great. But I was wrong. What she would rather have me done is come in, said hello, come and sat on the sofa and just been there whilst I was on my phone than
Wow.
sat in the car, because she
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
I was avoiding coming in the house and seeing her. So it's
Yeah,
so interesting how you can get
yeah,
it the
yeah.
other way around, even when you're trying, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you've got to
yeah.
ask,
No,
how can I
that
be a better
the
boyfriend
data is,
or
the
girlfriend or
perception's
husband or
reality.
wife or yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
But that is key, asking those questions. I don't know, maybe it's just the way that I'm designed. I've for years and years and years I've wanted critical feedback, because if somebody's thinking it, now it's down to me to decide whether I'm going to apply it or not, right?
yeah, yeah,
Everybody's got opinion, everyone's got an opinion. And sometimes those opinions are projections, right? They're not always, it doesn't necessarily mean it's
yeah.
true.
Could be in the
But
moment. Yeah,
I think I personally, I would rather be the determiner of that, which is why I'm always asking for that,
yeah,
and
yeah.
getting that. I don't know what you think. Um,
No, I think getting to the truth, and then letting that, and then getting a, because sometimes if it's an emotional response, it's not always true.
mm,
You know, just that it's just in that moment that it's feedback. So I think I'm a strong believer. Whether it's tracking or whether it's just getting honest feedback. How am I showing up? How do I need to be? Anything I'm doing, like, because I'll know in myself as well if things just got a bit intense with work, and then usually what happens is there are some social events. I call it social events, but let's, hockey, really, like a few tournaments here, and I'm like, it's another one, and then these things build up, and my wife is great. But my wife always said to me, I have no problem with the work, with the hockey. She's just not that sort of person. She would never say, I don't want you to play hockey. I don't, what would really upset her is if I didn't put the same effort in to the relationship.
mm,
So if I'm putting all this effort into the GB locker room because I want to win the gold medal or help the team win the gold medal, but I'm not putting any effort into the family, that's what would upset her. So it's comes back to just being proactive and saying,
mm,
okay, this week, let's make sure that we've got let's meet on Tuesday and Thursday for coffee. Let's do the school run together. Let's spend some time talking about this topic, or let's, or it could be something more intimate, like saying, like, I need to make sure that I give my wife a massage or something, something that just without an agenda, you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, quick fire round, I suppose. We spoke about a lot about body and
Mm,
and sort of exercise. We've just touched on relationships and what can be done there.
yeah.
What do you think are the three most important things people can do around mindset, with bringing mindset into the fold to
Mm.
balance, to create balance within the four keys?
So with mindset, this is, again, I mean, they all are, but it's very personal to the individual, because things that are getting in their way, making them feel stuck, can be external or they can be internal. We know that. And so there is something about, let's say it's internal, negative self-talk, problem with self-belief. This requires some deeper self-awareness, as and as coaches, we have to be careful of that because we're not therapists and so on. But a side note there, something I've been asking my clients now, when they have gut pain, back pain, something, migraines, something like that, I do always ask them the question, have you experienced trauma in your life? Because often, and maybe there's a secondary conversation we can have around that, but I have some examples that I'm quite happy to share that might resonate with the listeners. So I think there's the self work that we have to do around mindset. And there's also things going on in our life which are external, which we are either accepting in our life that aren't conducive to living the life we want, the life we love, and so on. And we're allowing these external factors, whether it's the office environment that we think we should work in, a relationship we're in, whatever. And so we have to work through those. I think there are some sort of pragmatic things that I would do if someone was really kind of overwhelmed, they're stuck, they don't know really where to go. I typically prescribe them just a good morning routine, as a kind of starting point. Just do these 5 things every morning within 20 minutes of waking up, and that's more a kind of a prescription, if you like, to help them get back, and just do that for 7 days. So it really depends on what is the feeling they're experiencing, from a mindset perspective. What's their biggest barrier?
Yeah, I think that's valid. A couple of things I want to say, and this is just a reminder because you experience trauma. I mean, whether you label it as that, but I would say that. Which, if you want to find out what that is, you're going to have to come and listen to episode 52 because we talk about it in episode 52. But I think that there's certainly I've experienced this. So one of the best, and I'll get him on the episode, get him on the show one day, is Gabor Mate's definition of trauma, and there was a distinction for me that wasn't from him, it was from somebody else, about sort of capital T trauma and lowercase t trauma. Because in my opinion, and this was certainly the case for me, is if people said, have you experienced trauma? The answer is no, because what I believe trauma is, right? People go, have I been raped? Have I been sexually assaulted? Have I ever like lost a family? Like those big things that impact. But actually, when we go, when it's almost phrased as, has there ever been, what was the time in your life when you were most disappointed or felt most lonely, or whatever that thing might be? Oh yeah, I can think of that time. And when you realize it's actually one of the lowest that they've ever felt, or whatever it was, and it happened when they were 8 years old or whatever. Well, in most people's book, that's not trauma, but it's the perception of what it was at that time. And I can't remember the exact Gabor Mate definition. I don't know if you know.
I don't know what he says about it, but my belief is that people don't see it as trauma because they believe that they navigated it really, really well. And the reason why they navigated it so well was mainly, 100% was because their fight-flight response kicked in. And so they have this moment, this kind of survival mode for a period of time, which can last 25 years, which is certainly my case, where all of a sudden they go, oh, but obviously there's these things going on. So I'll give you an example. I was with somebody, and he was complaining about his back and back pain and so on. So I asked the question. No, actually, I didn't ask the question. This is what inspired me to ask the question to other people, because it was so unbelievable, actually. So I said, I think I maybe did some timeline, like, what's the kind of darkest moment? What's the, or got into talking about his sort of family. And he said, I have a tricky relationship with my dad. I was like, right, okay. And my sisters, like, we don't really talk, it's awkward, he said. It's just family stuff, it's just awkward. And I said, oh, really? Okay. And then I left it. And then we kind of circled back. And then he said, my dad brought us all up, by himself. So it was hard for him. So he was starting to kind of empathize with his dad. I was like, oh, right. I said, and we got then talking about the mum. And he said, well, my mum died when I was 7. By the way, he'd said, like, no trauma in my life. I was like, right, okay. And then I came back to it and I just said to him, look, I have to be really honest with you. My son's 7 years old. If he lost his mum today, I think it would probably be the most traumatic thing in his life. He went, yeah, maybe. And it was so interesting how he's dismissing it in that moment. And then I realized he's absolutely petrified to go there, to acknowledge,
open that box. Yeah.
And of course, as a coach, we don't unpick that. We just say, well, how's that showing up for you today? And how might that be causing some of the challenges you're experiencing, when it comes to achieving your goals or your relationships and so on. it's probably been the way it is the biggest breakthrough in his life. He started having better conversations with his sisters, rebuilding relationship because they're starting to have the conversation and not having to put this armor on and protect what is essentially is the 7-year-old version of himself, which was still showing up today, you know. And so I asked it again of someone the other day, and they said, "No, I've not had any trauma. No, I'm good," you know, because he had gut problems. And then he went, yeah, well, my sister-in-law passed away, and my brother and I, we don't, you know, and and he reeled off about 5 things that he said, no trauma in my life, absolutely fine, but he's got problems with breath work, he's got problems with gut, he's got, you know, and then he went, yeah, actually the breathing problem, that started about then as well. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And it's like, really? And as a coach, you're like sitting there, or anyone would go, that seems really obvious. How can you not know that? Because we just don't want to go there, right? We just put it in a box, lock it up, and so that fight flight response is amazing, but it masks so much.
There's do you know Dr. Don Wood?
I don't know if I do. No.
Okay, I'll come on to that in a minute. So I found it. So Gabor Mate's definition is trauma is the wound that you sustained as a result of what happens. So trauma is not what happens to you. Trauma is what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you.
Yeah.
Right. Which essentially means it's a perception thing. That's why when you said about some people don't want to go there, some people just can't go there. Like their subconscious has blocked it out because it was too traumatizing. Like, it won't allow them to do it. So I highly recommend. So you'll love Dr. Don Wood, former hockey player. He used to live next door to Don Cherry. Right. Really interesting. Okay. Really interesting guy. Actually went over and played professional hockey in Sweden years ago. Incredible guy. One of the previous episodes, literally I think 2 or 3 episodes on this podcast. So guys, go and listen to it. But he's got an organization in Florida called the Inspired Performance Institute, and he basically has a process that gets people out of a whole bunch of different stuff, stress, anxiety, trauma in a matter of hours, because what's happened, he believes in lots of instances, is they've got caught in, I believe he calls it like a trauma loop, which is basically fight or flight, but you can't get out of it. It's this perpetual cycle. Anyway, really interesting. Go and listen to the episode for anyone that's listening to this. So you've now got episode 52 to go and listen to, and the Don Wood episodes to go and listen to.
I'll definitely check that out. I mean, I do think, you know, when people have, I mean, I know he talks about disease, isn't he, linked to trauma and why these things manifest in our body, whether it's, you know, any type of sickness. So when people say they've got a gut problem, IBS, they've got back pain, migraines, you know, and unfortunately some extreme cases where people, you know, tumors grow, cancer. I mean, we can't blame everything on it, but I think that this thing, we don't deal with this tension and this unconscious stuff. Yeah, it can certainly, and that's why I think coaching is a really good tool. I think therapy is a great tool, but some people don't always respond well to it, and they don't. But then, do you know the victim? You know, some people will use it as like I know people that have gout, and they don't want. It's like they won't make the change to their diet and do the things. They just want to live the normal, what they would call a normal life. Yeah. But it's like sometimes they just think they want to have gout. You know, I don't know if it's getting to other stuff here, but this idea of playing the victim suits people.
Yeah, secondary gain. But we don't need to go down that rabbit hole today. We'll save that for another episode. But yeah, so for anyone that has been listening to this, I do highly recommend you go and listen to episode 52 and also the more recent Don Wood one. What I'll also say to anyone that's been listening to this is, if you're finding this helpful, we're really having a big push on the podcast at the moment, so we really appreciate you subscribing and also leaving a review. So if you can leave a review, we're boosting the algorithms again. We believe we've got some fantastic episodes just like this one with Andrew that will enable you to, by you doing that, will help us crack the algorithms and all that wonderful stuff to help more people find out about the super useful information on the show from our wonderful guests like Andrew. So Andrew, thank you so much for joining me on the show. One final question before we wrap up. What's one thing you wished more people asked you about the 4 keys?
Oh, wow. You didn't prepare me for that one. What do I wish people asked me about the 4 keys? The only thing I can say that I think is the biggest epiphany for people is that people often come to me because we talk about business. They think, I just got to get the business sorted, you know, and then the relationship and my mental health, my physical health will all follow. And what they realize is, actually by fixing my health, my relationship, my mindset, my business is taking care of itself. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think people, they come into the program thinking they need something and actually, or they want something, but they actually need something else. So maybe the question is around, more people ask me the place to start. So if you take mindset, for example, a lot of these things are an inside game, right? You have to work from the inside out. And so mindset plays a big part in that. But I'm going to have to think a bit more deeply about the question. Like, I wish people asked me.
Yeah. Well, we haven't got that much time, so I know I'm putting you on the spot, but yeah, I still think even in that in itself is useful. But for people, I suppose it's not necessarily what they ask you, but it's just realizing where they can start. If they think they're going to start with the business, maybe look at the other areas. So interesting. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for being a guest again. It's great.
Pleasure,
4 years on to have you back.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me back. Good to speak to you. I know we could speak for hours.
We could indeed. And for everyone that's been listening, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Until next time, make it happen.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Make It Happen with Will Polston. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please feel free to share it with anybody that you think could benefit from it. And also make sure that you hit subscribe so that you get the new episodes as soon as they're released.